morning. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Katie Crandall. I'm a doctorate in atmospheric science from the University of Missouri with a research emphasis in social science. In 2019, I became a certified project management professional. Currently, I am a Cooperative Institute for Mesoscale Meteorological Studies research scientist with the National Weather Service Operations Proving Ground. I've been with the OPG for over 5 years. So a little food for thought to kind of start off this webinar. If you want to make enemies, try to change something. Woodrow Wilson. Our dilemma is that we hate change and love it at the same time. What we really want is for things to remain the same, but to get better. Sidney J. Harris. So we're going to start off this webinar with actual little audience participation. So you don't want to sit here and listen to me for a full hour. You want to actually do something and interact a little bit. So we actually have a poll question. And the question is, has there been a change in your office that has been resisted by yourself or some of your colleagues? The link to the poll question should be in your chat window if I'm correct.
Yes, the link has been posted to chat there.
Perfect. All right. It's a pretty quick question, so I'm going to go ahead and just give us about a minute. You can go ahead and answer, and then we'll go into the results and we'll talk about what people said for the poll question. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what everyone said. All right, so here's the responses. 44 people said yes, there has been a change in my office that people resisted. And then we did have a smaller section, about 3 people said no, there really wasn't a change in my office that was resisted by people. So overall, most people have had some sort of change that has been resisted in their office. Okay, what I want you to do next is make sure to write down that change. If you've had one that's been resisted in your office, we're going to use that change later on. If you were the few people that didn't have a change in your office, I want you to come up with a change that you resisted some point in your life. It could be anything related to home, work, any type of change, but you're just going to want that change as we go through the webinar. So go ahead and write that down, and then we'll start talking about through a few other things. All right, so why should we care if people are resistant to change? There's a couple of big important reasons we really need to think about and consider when things are changing for people. One, work stress caused by a resisted change can be very detrimental to a person's health, morale, and productivity. Secondly, an individual or group resisting a change could delay your change or completely derail it. So these are 2 very big important things that we need to look at, and we're going to talk about in just a bit. So we're going to talk about stress in the workplace for a few minutes. This is a small section of the Homes-Rahe life stress inventory. The way it works is that there's 43 life events on the list that cause stress to individuals. The events are numbered and they have weighted points given to them. What you would do is you basically would add up all the stressors that are occurring in your life and you would get a final score. If your score is 150 points or less, you have a low chance of stress-induced health problems. If your score is 150 to 300 points, you have a 50% chance of stress-induced health problems in the next 2 years. If your score is above 300 points, you have an 80% chance of stress-induced health problems in the next 2 years. Stress can really impact our health quite a bit and cause real physical health symptoms. The only one I left off this list is losing your job. That's kind of a whole different issue. We just want to talk about stress at work when you're actually at work. So these are the different parts of the stress inventory that are related to work. Major business readjustment, it's weighted 39, that's the highest. Changing to different line of work. Major change in responsibilities at work. Troubles with the boss. Major changes in working hours or conditions. All of this can be related to changes that are occurring in your workplace. Now, it doesn't seem a whole lot just on the surface if you're having changes to the work. But our work is not our whole life. We have things that also happen outside of work. Home issues that add on to stress. So when you have changes at work, even if they might be positive changes, it might still be adding to stress, and you never know how much stress someone else is dealing with at home. So it's something to be aware of, that sometimes resistance to change, even though you might not think it's such a big deal, it could be a really big problem for the person that's dealing with it. All right. Now this can be a problem for yourself if you're trying to move change forward. And it's that people that can actually derail your change. So when you actually make a change management plan, you have to identify stakeholders. Stakeholders are people that can derail your change and cause problems. You have to determine how they could possibly cause a problem with your change. If they have power, do they have the ability to stop the change? If they have legitimacy, they are a respected person, and they could get other people to take their side, and then that could cause a problem with your change. If they have urgency, it means they actually have the motivation to act, and they then can impede your change. So it's something that you need to consider, that if you're going to have a change in your office or something that's going to be moving forward, you have to identify if there's people that really can actually stop the change, or at least make life very difficult. So now that we've identified stakeholders and talked about stress in the workplace, we need to talk about what happens when someone goes through change. This is the Kübler-Ross change curve model. It's actually pretty complicated, so we'll spend some time to go through what's happening. If you look at the x-axis, it's time. So if you're farther to the left, you're looking into the past, and if you're farther to the right, you're looking into the future. On the y-axis, you have confidence, morale, and effectiveness, and that increases as you go higher up. So the first stage that you would have when a change is shock. Oh my goodness, what's happening? This, I'm not prepared for this. How do I deal with it? That's kind of the first stage you're going to go through. Your second stage could possibly be denial. I'll wait and see if this actually happens, or they've tried this before. We're not really going to see this change. As you go down the curve, and if this is a major change and especially large in scope, you might have frustration and might even have anger. You weren't ready for this change, you were consulted, and you're just not happy about it. Stage 4 is depression. You get to the very bottom, and you're just unhappy. Everything is changing for what you do. You don't like the way things are going. It's just, you feel like you're at the bottom. When you get to stage 5, things start getting a little bit better. You start getting into the exploration mode. You're kind of thinking, okay, let me see what this change is about. How is it going to relate to me? You start opening your eyes a little bit. If you go to stage 6, you actually are going to embrace the change. You're like, okay, I need to accept this. How do I move forward? How do I incorporate this change into my workflow, into everything I'm doing? When you get to the final stage, stage 7, that is integration. The change has been made. Everyone is moving forward. So that's, not everyone's going to have all the different stages or go through the exact same feelings, but this is what someone could be dealing with as they're going through a change. What you see in the cyan green color is basically what management and advocates for the change can do to help people at the different stages along the curve. So between stages 1 and 2, the best thing that you can do for people is to give them information, as much information as you possibly can about the change, the plan, how it's going to impact people. Everything you can, be as transparent and honest as possible. Between stage 2 and 4, stage 2 and 4 and 3, really people need support. This is going to be the hardest part for them. You really need to sit and be able to listen to people. They need to be able to express their anxieties, what they're feeling, and you just need to be supportive and really actually listen to people. When you're going from stage 5 all the way to stage 7, People really need guidance. Guidance is going to be really important because they want to, take on the change. They want to adjust to things, but they're not sure how to do it. You need to have a great plan. You need to have decent training, and you really need to help them through at that point. When you're off going on to stage 7, integration, encouragement is what you really need to help people with. Celebrate small wins, tell them they're doing a great job, really help them go through the change. So this is just typically what someone might go through when you're having a major change at work. So now that we've talked about what happens when you go through the change curve, we need to talk about different types of change. There's 3 different types of change that you might be experiencing. There is task change, there is identity change, and there is relationship change. Task change when you ask a person to, change something that they're doing in their work environment. A great example would be a machinist. So a task change would be, okay, you are no longer making this one part, you are going to make a new part. That would be a task change. Identity change would be if you take this person that's a machinist and they have a certain role and a certain identity, and you say, okay, well, your job's going to be retitled, you're going to have a new title, and you're going to have a new identity. You're still doing similar tasks, but we're going to change basically what you're referred to and what your job technically is. The third would be a relationship change. That'd be if you say to the machinist, okay, well, you're going to keep making the same part, but we're going to move you from the team you're on now to a different team, but you're still going to be doing the same thing. That would be if the different changes are all separate. The truth is, most changes don't just happen in one individual sector. Often they're overall and all-encompassing. So an example of this from my life is when I was a chief meteorologist for a radio station in Columbia, Missouri. This was in 2009, and if 2009 ring any bells, you know probably where I'm going. So that was, of course, when we had the start of the Great Recession. At the time, the station and basically the parent company that I worked for cut 50% of the people working for the radio station, and I was one of them. So I was basically without a job. For me, that type of a change, that is a combination of all 3, basically the mother of all changes. So it was a task change because I was no longer, doing forecasts. I was no longer on air. That was completely gone. It was an identity change because I was no longer chief meteorologist for a radio station. That was taken away from me. It was a relationship change because the people I saw every day that were my friends and coworkers, I no longer saw them, at least in the capacity of work. So that's one of the major changes someone can go through, and it's actually very high on the Homes-Rahe life scale change because it's not only financial, it affects all aspects of your life. Now, it was an overall good change for me in the end, but believe me, at the time, I was really resistant to that change. All right. Okay, time for another poll question. So the question that, I told you to write down that change that you were thinking about and have it for later on the webinar. Well, we're going to use it right now. What I want you to do is determine what type of change was it. I'm going to give you more time for this. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes because you really need to kind of think through and think, how was this change, how did it impact people and what type it was? So we're going to give you a little bit of time for that. Okay, hope everyone is still with me. All right, so here are the responses. So the biggest amount that we had was just a task change. So they identified that really all it is changing what you're doing. You're changing to a different task. The next largest was actually all three. So it's good to, to think about the fact that a change can encompass all sorts of different things, and you really need to think about that. So task, identity, and relationship change. The next was a task and identity change was the next highest. Then task and relationship, and then identity and relationship. So it's something just to always keep in mind is that probably the easiest thing that you're going to deal with is a task change. You do training, you help people prepare for it. That's probably the easiest thing that you're going to do. But when you start adding other different aspects, that's when it gets really hard. Identity is also a really hard change to deal with because identity is really, really important to us, especially in the United States. A lot of people tie their identity to their work. It's just kind of the way we've been raised and how we sometimes look at things. And so when you change someone's identity, that can cause a lot of stress because it means so much to them. So always be aware of when you do have an identity change, that's something you have to, you have to go through it very slowly and very carefully. And a relationship as well. We spend 8 hours a day at work. The people we work with are really important. When you change that, that can be really jarring to people. They would have to, make new friends, learn how to get along with new coworkers. So relationship change can also be really hard. So it's something that's always good to identify what type of change it is, so that way you can help people move through it. So why do people resist change? Well, we have to stop right there. That title really isn't correct because people don't actually resist change. We change all the time. We have new hobbies, we cut our hair, we get a new car. Change is not something we generally resist. What we do resist is change that is thrusted upon us or change that we don't decide on our own. So here's the better way to title this. Why might a person resist a change? Okay, there's actually a bunch of different reasons, and we kind of need to go through all those different what all those different reasons can be. There are three types of resistance to change. There is thought-based resistance, there is fear-based resistance, and there is capacity-based resistance. So thought-based resistance. If someone has thought-based resistance, these might be some of the things that they say. We have tried this before and it just doesn't work. Why are we making this change? I don't understand. Or why change what's not broken? So that's a thought-based resistance. So here's some of the solutions that you can have for that. Show your colleagues that you have commitment to the change. Have enthusiasm and a positive attitude. That can help go a long way. Ask for and take feedback. If you can, pass the feedback up the chain of command. People want to feel that they're being heard and their opinions matter. Be very transparent and honest about the change. That's one of the best things you can do. Don't tell people what they want to hear. Actually be honest. A good example of that comes from the book Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I recommend it to anyone that really wants a great leadership book. This is just a really good excerpt that kind of talks about being honest with your employees. So a few years ago, she was listening to the CEO of Costco give a series of closed session questions to the senior leadership. She was actually going to do a presentation afterwards. The atmosphere in the room was not very happy at all. People were very angry and not really happy with what was going on with the company and what the CEO had to say. The questions were tough that they gave the CEO, and he responded with equally tough and often tougher questions. She was really dreading being able to talk after this because she thought, oh, people are going to be so angry. They're not going to listen to anything I say. It's just going to be a waste of time. After everything wrapped up, out of nowhere, everyone just jumped to their feet, started clapping and cheering for the CEO. She was just, completely flabbergasted. She's like, I have no idea what just happened right now. So she asked the woman sitting next to her what happened, and the woman says, here at Costco, we cheer for the truth. So even though the senior leadership and others in the room didn't really like what the CEO was saying, they cheered because he told them the truth. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't, try to get around it. He was honest, and that was the most important thing to him. So it's just a great, thing that the best thing you can do is just tell people how things honestly are. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to soften it that way. People want the truth. The last thing you can do to help people with thought-based resistance is talk about employee impacts. People want to know what's going to happen to them. That's really important to really, and even if you don't know, tell them that as soon as you get any inclination of what that might mean, you're going to pass it on, because that's just going to be really important to people. The next resistance you might face is fear-based resistance. You might hear from people that say, will this change cause me to lose my job? Or will my team stay together? Or am I going to have to work up from the bottom again? Fear-based resistance is incredibly common, and it's really hard for people. So here's what you can do to help people that have fear-based resistance. Number one, you must have trust with your colleagues and your employees. I can't sugarcoat this. It takes time. You have to take time to build trust with people. It takes getting to know people. It takes spending time with them. It's not something that you can easily get past. Really listen to people's feelings and anxieties. People want to be heard, and they want to know that you care about what's going on with them. Really listen, put the phone down, step away from the computer, really listen to what's going on with people. The next is to show how important the individual is to the change. Let them know this can't be done without them, and that they're very important. That's going to go a long way to help with fear-based resistance. You can't get rid of all fear, that's not possible, but you can help people go through it. A capacity-based resistance. This is a little bit easier to deal with, I think, because there's just some more easy, concrete solutions. So capacity-based resistance, people might say, do I have the skills for this change? Will I get the training that I need? Or I just don't have time to make this change. So this is how you deal with capacity-based resistance. You have a detailed plan for employees. Again, information, information, information. The more people know, the more they have basically a road map through this change, the better for them. Make sure they have training and that the training is actually well done. If it's not good, if it doesn't give them what they need, you're not going to win any points with people. Celebrate when you have small victories. Change is not going to happen all at once. It's going to happen over a long period of time. So when you meet certain goals, make sure to celebrate it. All right. Okay, we're on to the last poll question of the webinar. And again, I'm going to give you a little more time to work on this. So now that we talked about different types of resistance to change, I want you to think back to that change that we've been working through this webinar and decide what type of resistance did you have from the change. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes, give you a little more time to work through this. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at what everyone said. All right. Okay, so the highest amount, 9 people, it was a thought, fear, and capacity change. So again, lots of different things that they had to deal with this change. It's going to be a lot more difficult than if it's just one separate change or type of change. The next one was thought and fear. That kind of makes sense. It was next most common. Then you go to fear and capacity. Then thought and capacity. And then small for ones that just have each different separate type of change and type of resistance. So again, the larger the change, the bigger the scope, the more likely you're going to have multiple different types of resistance with that change. It's something you have to manage, something you have to be aware of. But if you go in kind of knowing that this is possible, it will definitely help you to be able to navigate those resistance and help people move through them. Sometimes a change doesn't work, and sometimes something that you have to admit. If you have a change that's just not working, be strong enough to admit that it's just not going to work for your office, it's just not going to be a good change, and have plans for reversing the change. I like this example from the University of Kansas because they basically made a change and then ended up walking it back. A few years ago, they tried to change their on-campus dorms and how they were running. Each dorm floor had a person that would clean and take care of basic maintenance for the floor. The job was usually held by women. They did some cost analysis and they concluded that they would save money if instead of having someone on each floor, they would have people just assigned to specific tasks. Like, okay, for the whole dorm, you're going to clean the women's restrooms, or for the whole dorm, you're going to make sure all the light bulbs are changed, those type of things. In their minds, they thought that it was just going to be a task change. No big deal, it'll be hard at first, but they'll adjust. Well, they were wrong. It was actually a task, identity, and relationship change. The employees were unhappy because they really got attached to their dorm floor. And they cared deeply about the students that were on that floor. They even thought of themselves as the dorm mom. This was my floor. I'm dorm mom for floor number 9, and that was really important to them. That identity was taken away when they went to this task change. The students were unhappy because they missed the person that was there on their floor. This person was someone that was always there. They could go talk to them if they were homesick or just having a bad day. So for the students, they took away that resource. So it took away that relationship from those students. The university saw what was happening and they actually decided to make it right. They figured that, the money we were saving just wasn't worth it to the pain that we were causing our students and the pain that we were causing the employees. So they went ahead and went back, even though it was going to cost them more money. I kind of wanted to wrap up this webinar and then also cement some concepts for you by giving you a roadmap of leading through change. So the first thing, if possible, before you even start the change, get employee feedback. That would be the best thing you could possibly do. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have change come from way higher up than your job level is, and you're just going to have to go with it. But if you possibly can, try to get feedback from people about what they think about the change before you even start. Smaller changes over time are a lot better than one large change. It's just much easier for people to deal with. Be transparent, honest, and informative. Again, that's just the best thing you can do for people. They want information, make sure to provide it for them. Have a robust plan. Really think this through. Have a plan mapped out. These are what the milestones we're gonna hit. This is how we're gonna do that. That's really gonna help people. Listen, understand, and support. People are gonna need your help. They're gonna have to help them through this. Be there, really listen to people, and you will help them a lot. Provide training, especially if it's a task change. They need to know how to, change what they're doing. They need to have good training for it. They need to know how they're going to move forward with this. And if you provide good training and they have what they need, it's going to make things a lot better. Celebrate the wins. your final win is when the change is completely implemented, but you're going to have smaller ones over time, and that's going to help people stay motivated and keep wanting to move through the change. The last thing, and this often actually gets overlooked by people, once you get through the change, document the process and what was learned. That way, then when you have another change that's going to happen in your office, you can go back, you can see what worked and what didn't work. Also, we aren't always leading other people through change. Sometimes we have to lead ourselves through change, and that's going to be a little different. One thing that you must do is you must deal with emotion. You can't deal with emotion through logic. It doesn't work. You're going to have to feel it through. You're going to have to try to understand why you're feeling the way you are with this change. You need to determine barriers. Why am I resisting this change? What's going on in my life? Can I resist this change, or do I really need to just accept and move through, and how can I do that? Find where you fit into the plan, where you can put your mark, and figure out where you're going to fit. Find people that support you. Sometimes, especially when you're going through really hard changes, you need to find people that are going to support you and be able to be a sounding board and be there for you. Just some special consideration. This presentation was adapted from a much longer workshop facilitated by Dr. Lee Stewart at the University of Kansas. He is a fantastic facilitator, and he's actually a leadership coach. He's coached like 350 organizations, just a wonderful speaker. He does this huge long workshop. It's 8 hours, and he does many different type of leadership things. I highly recommend it if possible. If you can take it, you will not be disappointed. So one for the road to think about when we leave. The world hates change, yet is the only thing that has brought progress. Charles Kettering. I also have lots of references for you, different leadership books, different articles that you can reference. I can also let you know some of the books that I've read that I really like on leadership, things I've done for project management, but they're all there for you. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we have plenty of time for questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we can answer them now, but you can also email me anytime with any questions that you would have.